Happy Monday, everybody. This is Live in Fort Collins, where we come to you every week at 12 p.m. noon Mountain Standard Time to talk to you guys about things that are happening in Fort Collins, City Council or work session recap, and things to do this weekend, which is Memorial Day weekend. So a long weekend for the kids, and also a lot of schools are going to, this is either their last week of school, or for Poudre School District, next week is going to be their last week. So a lot of field day activities that are happening, graduations, for preschool and all the good stuff. So it's an exciting time for everybody. And also a lot of summer vacations are going to start taking place. And at the end, we'll talk to you about some 9 things to do this Memorial Day weekend from Visit Fort Collins. And this week's work session was really a pretty, packed work session. They talked about Visit Fort Collins, kind of its 2024 numbers, air pollution, transport, and then our civic center down in Old Town area, which comprises of 12 city blocks. But let's jump right in. And if you've got any questions while I am live, feel free to ask them. Engage. This is a great opportunity to ask real-time questions and get real-time answers. But if you're watching this on a rerun, please comment below, and I'd love to get back to you when I can. So let's jump right in. I didn't realize that Old Elk's closed on May 8th, their tasting room. It was kind of a fun little place there off of Linden, and always pretty busy, but some great drinks. I've, just being honest, I thought it was cool, or would be cool, if I liked whiskey. And when I was younger, when I was, we just bought our first house. I was probably 23 or 24, and I would come home and I thought it was cool to have, a whiskey and Coke, because I thought that's kind of what you were supposed to do. But my wife would look at me like, you're kind of an idiot. Like, you don't even like this. Why are you doing this? And I was like, but I'll begin to like it. It's an acquired taste. Well, I've never really liked whiskey. I can sip it every now and again. And if I'm sitting there, and just kind of want to not go with, beer or anything like that, I will enjoy, to a certain degree, a whiskey. But Old Elk's is a fan favorite in Fort Collins. Unfortunately, it closed. It did sell to an Ohio-based spirits company, and some of their employees are going to move to Ohio, but they are closing that down. One fact I didn't realize was it was Nancy and Kurt Richardson who had founded Old Elk's in 2013. So nice to see them have some success, kind of with the struggles of Otterbox as of late. Hopefully we see Otterbox make kind of that turn into, the positive, the green, as we need those businesses and employees all to be strong and secure in our town. Swetsville Zoo is back on the market. In 2019, it hit the market for, so quick story. For those of you that are watching that are from Fort Collins, Northern Colorado, you'll know what Swetsville Zoo is. For others that are just kind of out of the area or looking to get as much information as they can about Fort Collins, Northern Colorado, Swetsville Zoo is this very unique metal animal sculpture zoo in Timnath. And growing up, there would generally be a field trip there once a year, or you'd go with your family and explore it. And I actually grew up and worked with a little bit one of the Swets. Their last name is Swets, one of their grandchildren. And so I didn't, it was pretty cool, but it's been like a staple in Fort Collins, Northern Colorado. Super unique and kind of creepy, honestly, but very cool as far as somebody doing that and providing access to their private property for the public to go and enjoy. But no longer has that been the case since 2019, when it hit the market for sale for about $10 million, 36 acres. And this is just to the east of Costco. And the Swetsville, or the Swets Farm area, they've slivered off pieces over the years, including the Costco section, to developers. And the current developer had been under contract since 2022, when they submitted plans for a mixed use, live, residential, commercial really pretty cool because it kind of wraps around the Poudre River quite a bit. And we actually just recently had a question about flood zones in Fort Collins, northern Colorado, and there's really not too many except near the Poudre River. And so there's some work that had to go through FEMA and lots of different planning and things of that nature. Well, it just hit the market, came back onto the market for $8.7 million, which tells you roughly where probably they were under contract at with this developer. And man, I can only imagine how many, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars this developer spent on all of this time and planning. And they're still hopeful that they can close on this land in 2025. But currently it's on the market, could be negotiating tactics, but it's a very unique piece of land with very desirable access to the Poudre River and obviously like the gateway to Fort Collins, Timnath, northern Colorado. So hopeful for the Swets family to have a successful sale as they've given so much to the community over the years, like I said, providing access and this kind of just cool hobby that became a thing in Fort Collins. So if you want to look up Swetsville Zoo and you'll see some pretty unique metal sculptures on their property. Transport's returning evening services starting May 19th. So it's going to go today. So it's going to go all the way up, and their last services at the South Transit Center will be at 11:33 p.m. and it'll be Monday through Saturday. They will return Sunday service, I believe, in 2026. And it's interesting because part of what we're going to be talking about here of what the City Council work session discussed was our transport and transportation study on our transport master plan and how there's going to be some pretty significant changes to transport in the coming years based off of that. So I did a video last summer on public transportation. It was fun. For me, I had to get to the Flex line, which then got me to the Harmony Transit Center, which then got me downtown. If you had to do any types of transfers within Fort Collins, very difficult. And you got to time it pretty well. But along the Max Transit, very, very reliable, every 20-minute service. So if you're going up and down, north and south on the Max Transit, it's a game changer. All righty, I'm going to share my screen. Let me just get something going real quick. All right, share my screen. All righty. Where we at? There we go. All right, so this work session had 4 different main sections on it. Real quickly, work sessions comparatively to city council meetings are essentially a way for there to get extremely detailed, no public comment, just what is on tap in Fort Collins and city council now and into the future, next 1 to 10 years, and how can we plan for it? City work session, city council meetings is where they actually take votes on, hear from the public, and hear final presentations for certain things. So this week, Visit Fort Collins, they did have a new website, which I wanted to show that because actually a buddy of mine just recently asked, like, where could we go play trivia? And my wife this last week actually went and played bingo at Breckenridge Brewery on like a Wednesday. But this website's really pretty awesome as far as like things to do in Fort Collins. This is Visit Fort Collins. So like I told him, I said, hey, trivia night, it goes at the Speak Cheesy Lounge, but there's other opportunities and there's beer and bingo. Just kind of like, and there's a lot going on in Fort Collins all of the time. Now, I do have a weekly newsletter that I send out, things to do. And I kind of scour this among other kind of websites in northern Colorado, the Lincoln Center, things of that nature, to try to build what I believe would be really fun and our kind of top 4 things to do. But Visit Fort Collins website is pretty awesome and lots of things going on, good information, good blog posts as well. Some of it I'm not a big fan of, honestly, the website, but the website is performing very well, up 40% active users went up 50%, and they weren't necessarily expecting that when they launched it. All right, let's keep going down. There's a few different huge articles. There was a whiskey advocate that ended up coming and loving Fort Collins. Did a kind of a write-up on Vortic watches. And then in Men's Journal, there was the perfect 3-day weekend in Fort Collins. So those are some pretty big articles and some pretty big published media outlets where this is kind of Visit Fort Collins, and the CEO and president, Cynthia Eichler, who's running it. That's kind of like a big part of her job is, getting people in and around Fort Collins. I put in there, per their website, there's about 1 million visitors to Fort Collins annually. If you're coming to visit in Fort Collins, or even honestly, if you're a local to Fort Collins and you're looking for a space or information, Visit Fort Collins is absolutely phenomenal. And they just recently opened up a space down in Old Town where Cooper Smith's used to be. And it is a gathering spot. It is a place for tons of information. So if you've got a group and need an affordable space to leverage and use, this might be it, because it's a beautiful build out and something really special to Fort Collins. Let's see here. Here's kind of some of the high levels. So they hosted 41 events last year, but they're planning on hosting 104 this year. But in March, I actually had coffee with Cynthia, and she said at that time they were like 30. What was it? There was a significant amount of events, and she was just thrilled about how much the space has been used. Ram Talks, basically there's 12 speakers from. A lot of it is CSU professors and students who are giving a talk and conversation on a specific topic. And apparently their most popular one was about elephants and how they name each other and talk to each other, and have, a language. So a big part of Visit Fort Collins' business is tourism, and they've got big relationships with hotels. And so, that's really what's big for them. So they have 4 people in sales, and they're working on bringing different activities and camps and tournaments. One thing that Cynthia said was a huge factor, or something that is hugely important to them is youth sports, because even when people are getting tight on their budgets, one of the last things that people cut is their youth sports budget, which is pretty crazy, but that's a big driver for them to get. Specifically, they had gotten I'm going to skip down real quick to a hockey tournament here in Fort Collins. First one was in 2024, and they hosted in February of 2024. It was such a success that they hosted again in November. And this year, they're planning 3 different tournaments that bring, what was it? Here we go. 41 traveling teams and 1,186 room nights during that time. And they call that the shoulder period. What was it? September through April. Maybe it was October through April, kind of their slow season. And so these hockey tournaments are during their slow season. So hugely important to the economy in general, because I want to show you how much of an impact tourism has in Fort Collins. Real quick, $7.7 million in sales tax revenue. Our 2024 sales taxes collected were about $200 million. So this was, very much rounded numbers, but about 5% of our annual sales tax collected comes from tourism. And this is, pretty important. And additionally, 5,359 jobs are directly related to tourism. So it's a huge industry and important part of Fort Collins' economic health. And so having people like Cynthia Eichler, who is just a rock star, and how much Fort Collins is supporting and getting behind that. Let's go through a couple of their key findings. I thought that was just kind of interesting. Satisfaction comes with respondents are particularly happy with the cleanliness of the town and the variety of things to do and restaurant choices. Let's see here. what else I think was cool? Oh, the net promoter score. I didn't look this up, but apparently has a score of 67 compared to 26 in 2019, saying that 44% of people were likely to promote Fort Collins comparatively to other areas around the Front Range is quite positive. I thought that was pretty interesting. One thing that's not on this slide is who the visitors are. There's a lot more travelers coming to Fort Collins that are from vehicle travel. So like parts of Kansas, Nebraska, Wyoming, New Mexico, kind of the surrounding areas. As a nation, there are some estimates that tourism could go down 9 to 20% on international travel. And there's been some anecdotal data here in Fort Collins that we've seen some cancellation of rooms from specifically kind of Canadians. Like I said, mostly anecdotal, no hard facts at this time, but a big momentum behind car vehicle travel to Fort Collins and Northern Colorado comparatively to airline travel. That was one thing that I thought was pretty interesting. Oh, shoulder season success. That was good. All right, let's skip down to our transport optimization study. So in 2019, we had a transport optimization plan that went out to build out in 2040. And if we were to get to that build out, we have transportation modes plan build out. It needs an additional, this isn't our total, an additional $15 million. And then on top of we need an additional $3 million. Our 2050 transit sales tax, which was a 0.5-cent sales tax that sent $5 million annually to transportation, $5 million annually to public or air quality, and then $10 million to parks and recreation. That's what it was. I was like, oh, man, I almost forgot. But essentially, we have this plan that's very robust and exciting, but is not possible. And so our city staff, I should say, is going back to the drawing board to find out what do we need to do to make this viable. Some things that are not in this presentation are currently they're working on some advertising contracts. They almost got it signed. So for the last many years, you'll notice that Fort Collins buses don't have advertising on there. They only have advertising for the city of Fort Collins, like clean air, ride transport for free, on bus benches, all over the place. There's no advertising on these locations, but they're going to start again, and it's going to be a revenue driver. They are trying to build revenue for public transportation because as of COVID, and I think even just before COVID, transport became free to all riders. So it's a free public transportation in Northern Colorado. And the reason that is, and that's also not in here, let's kind of scoot down a little bit. The reason that is because it actually costs more than what the bus fee generated in revenue to operate this fee collection system. And I thought that was pretty wild. Pat Yandi, I want to say, Melanie, council member Pat Yandi, want to be respectful, of course, actually came up with a really cool kind of idea. I don't know how much it would gain traction, but she was saying, what if we kind of pay as you can model? And there's a place in Fort Collins that I can't think of the name right now. We actually had them on our podcast, but they have this similar model of like a pay what you can cafe. And now that I said cafe, that's exactly what it is, but I can't think of that name. So if you can think of the name that I'm missing, let me know in the comments so I don't look like such an idiot. But she had this idea of like, hey, pay as you can for public transportation. Do you like public transportation? Do you want to see it get better? If you can and you can afford, why don't you pay or donate or whatever that might be through this QR code? And I was like, that's kind of a cool concept. Don't know what type of traction it would get, but maybe some, even, if it increased ridership. And because right now what this is showing is based off of 2019 levels, so pre-COVID, because once COVID happened, our public transportation across the country just plummeted. And so our percent ridership in 2021, it was at 33% of 2019 numbers. And we're still only at 59% of ridership in 2024. Now, that's kind of par for the course for most of the United States, except some of our comparative cities are actually on average 107% of ridership per comparatively to 2019 levels. And so that was kind of a conversation of like, what are they doing better than us to get ridership back to where it was and above? And a lot of it comes down to reduced services and also reduced services and increased, there's some answers here. I can't remember, but reduced services was the biggest one. And that's kind of what we're looking at doing in Fort Collins. Here, the yellow is number of trips starting in each area. They did have numbers also that our daily commutes have actually increased in vehicles over the last many years, which is kind of counter to some of our city priorities of getting more vehicles off the road. But the vehicle trips have decreased from, I think it's 15 minutes to 8 minutes in each vehicle, but more trips in vehicles, which is also interesting because they said, you'll see here kind of our time of day travels. A lot of people are working from home. So, we're seeing a little bit, comparative to this is a very heavy in the morning time period to work and when you're heading home from work. And this has just kind of stayed relatively consistent across the day comparatively to kind of these two big spikes. So a lot of people are working from home more. But a lot of Southeast Fort Collins, a lot of demand as far as our ridership kind of along this corridor. This is CSU, kind of like one of our busiest sections. And right now, per our plan, we're going to have this Elizabeth corridor as well as this max transit. And I think long term, there was going to be one along Harmony and one along, I think it was Drake or Prospect as far as a high frequency bus rapid transit system. Okay. So they've come up with initially 6 different ideas of like, how can we make a transit plan that actually works? And so they came up with these 6 different, opportunities. Obviously existing routes, everything is just neutral or no change. And then they got down to 3 different alternatives: travel patterns, rider demand, and condensed with microtransit. I don't know still what microtransit means because I don't think they didn't explain it very well. There's going to be sending out a memo to the city council members. It's not Uber. It's not Dial-A-Ride. But apparently there is kind of like these little zones within the travel areas that you can get. You can go through an app and request a ride, and they've got a certain amount of vehicles per zone that could come and pick you up and take you to a high frequency route or bus stop. Here are the 3 different scenarios kind of laid out. And what they're saying is that it shows the final scenario will not be just one of these, but really a blended hybrid, because over the next few months, they're going to go through and do some public outreach and discussion about what do you want as a citizen in Fort Collins and to see for your public transportation. So travel pattern, high frequency direct routes on major traffic corridors. So this, to me, what I read on this was like more minimize the amount of routes, but increase the a few routes that we do have to more readily available rather than on the hour, on the half hour. It's every maybe 15 to 20 minutes for specific routes. Direct service, no microtransit included. So they did also say every person on the public transportation bus costs about $7. if you're doing a micro transit, it's about $20 per ride. So definitely, less guesswork of how often do we need this with public transportation routes, and more like on demand, but it does cost you a little bit more. Traffic volumes, car travel patterns, rider demand, service for transit related. So direct routes, some micro transit, optimized for quality and access, demographic analysis. And then this is kind of a condensed, so fewer routes, fewer fixed routes, but more micro transit routes. So more on demand routes for this opportunity. So it's kind of like high frequency main routes, no micro transit, still fewer routes, but a little bit more than the high frequency, but still a little bit of micro transit. Mostly micro transit with very, very few fixed routes, probably like max transit, and that's it. Is my guess. That's just me talking, not necessarily this. They want to get community feedback, next steps. So they're, right now the focus is the community feedback. So if you want to give your input, they would love that. They're going to have a campaign going here pretty closely. They're going to have open houses. They're going to have online surveys, press releases, social media posts. So they want your input. And if I were to give mine at this time, I would definitely be on the closer to the, just get us 3 or 4 different routes that are extremely consistent, and then have a few micro transit rides in those 4 routes that kind of take you to outskirts, outlier areas. So I'm definitely more of kind of a combination of like rider demand just on these big, heavily used routes, make it more reliable, and then some micro transit from there. That's my opinion. Okay, questions. Okay, let's keep on going. Now we got some air quality and air pollution. So what's interesting is obviously, or not obviously, but we live in northern Colorado, Fort Collins. A big thing is quality of life, living, and clean eating, clean drinking, all this good stuff. But we rank pretty poorly as a county on air quality, which for me, I've never necessarily noticed, except for during like wildfires, if there are wildfires and you see some smoke and things of that nature come into the area. So those are definitely like times that I'm not thrilled about. But overall, like, and I'll show you here in a little bit, the majority of all of our days have pretty good air quality. It's just on between 5 to 40 days a year, you either have sensitive air quality sensitive to sensitive groups, or air quality is dangerous for all groups on a fewer amount of days. But they're looking at all these 4 different things. Council priorities, our climate future. Here are some of our goals: 80% greenhouse gas emissions reduction by 2030, and then 100% renewable. City plan, carbon neutral community by 2050. And then our strategic plan as well. Okay. That's fine. But here I want to see some our climate future goals: 50% below 2005 baseline, 80% below by 2030. We're a little off target. And that was definitely a topic of conversation, is like, we're not hitting our goals currently, and we're not projected to hit our goals without pulling some levers, which I'll talk about here shortly. So here's our 2005 levels. Our 2020 goal is 20%. We're right now, I think we're right now about 27%. I think it shows right here. Yeah, 27% as of 2023. So we're not at or close to our 80% reduction by 2030. Like, we've got a long way to go. But if we can get there by pulling some levers, there are some things that are happening that are going to make a pretty big impact. And I'll talk about that here shortly. Here's where our greenhouse gas emissions come from. The good thing is obviously they're trending downward. Our electricity is a big provider from that, rawhide, and that's going to go offline here pretty soon. And I'll show you the impact that makes. Natural gas, ground travel, a big portion, but not huge, solid waste, and water. Okay, here's our how we are consuming electricity by year. So tons of coal right here, right? All the way coal, up until rawhide expires, and they're building the new rawhide currently that goes to all natural gas. So natural gas will still be a pretty big component for us and producer of, some greenhouse gas emissions. But one of the things that they talk about at City Council and Platte River Power Authority is like they're never going to give up reliable electricity in turn for reduction of greenhouse gases. They're going to keep reliable energy until we can, with assurance, provide reliable electricity to everyone in Fort Collins and their other 3 communities, Estes Park, Loveland, and don't know, Longmont maybe. I think it is Longmont. But they provide power to 4 different communities, and they're not going to give up reliability in term for greenhouse gases. But in 2026 into 2027, rawhide goes offline. All of our coal electricity is essentially gone, replaced with natural gas. But as you can see, they're really expecting solar to take off. I mean, talk about like a hockey stick right here. And additionally to solar, virtual power plants, VPPs. And then wind as well, water. That is how we're going to be getting our most of our electricity during that time. Here is our air quality data. So over the years, since 2012, we've fluctuated between 40 days on, healthy, unhealthy for sensitive groups or unhealthy, all the way down to, 5 days. Now, obviously no days would be preferred, but when you have in like 2020 and 2021, we had big wildfires in that year. And 2013 is also when we had our last big wildfire year. So it's kind of obviously correlated to those years. And, last year we had a few wildfires going on, not necessarily in Colorado, but from like Montana and California that find its way here. Here is where all of our air quality issues come from. Other engines, landscaping, I think that's like example, landscaping, and don't know what the G is, but small engines, vehicles, oil and gas, electricity generation, not bad actually on 4% comparatively to how much attention we're giving to it, but environmental, and then industrial too. We're not a big industrial area here in northern Colorado, but while Larimer County doesn't have any oil and gas production, Weld County is very heavy. And I've talked with, folks about our weather patterns and like east versus west I-25. And you kind of have the foothills that kind of capture some of that oil and gas that would flow out of the area, but kind of gets caught up there. So, they did talk quite a bit about how do we as a region reduce some of this, because we're not going to be able to. Larimer County can't pull any levers on oil and gas, essentially. Like, it's not us, it is our friends to the west in other areas. But things that we can control: vehicles, other engines, building performance standards. So this is where our 2050 tax dollars went. $4 million funded 16 projects. Across 8 Our Climate Future big moves, but this kind of is a little bit of a breakdown. Our air pollution, Our Climate Future is getting $5 million additional each year for air pollution and projects that will help alleviate some of these issues. So super cool as far as what we're working on. We're not going to reach those goals, and Council Member Kelly Olson's like, when are we going to have that conversation of like readjusting, kind of like we're doing with the transport study? Like, let's kind of stop putting this pie in the sky and be realistic. But another person who was on our podcast was very positive, and the comment that he made was, if you want to go slow, go alone. If you want to go fast, go together. And so what he's really hopeful for is kind of a collaboration between all the communities, all the region, to really work on this. So here is how they're going to decrease our greenhouse gas emissions and work on different things. Utility rates, and those are going to be, basically like saying, hey, don't use your electricity during this time, or that's when it's going to be charged the most. So incentives in changing out your furnace to an electric heat pump, financing and other city fees. So they're going to be, essentially providing options for people to finance, possibly solar and things of that nature. Education, awareness, transparency, and technical assistance on behavioral. So that's just kind of more of like, we as a community need to change some of our behaviors to get there. Regulatory. Now, this is kind of where they start to say, we like to see you do this. Economically, we'll provide incentives and values, and hopefully it makes sense for you. Behavioral, we want to make sure this change. But then regulatory, or slapping you on the wrist, if not big spanking, whatever the term is these days. Policies, building codes, and standards saying, hey, we're going to change out some of our energy efficient building codes. We're going to put in some building performance standards and require citizens, buildings, businesses in Fort Collins to abide by these. And then infrastructure, our distribution grid. So that's kind of the virtual power plant, contractors and workforce, advanced grid management. Sorry, that advanced grid management, I believe that's the virtual power plant. And also you kind of solar power systems that we're thinking about putting out. I think out by Severance is a huge one that's being built. So we are working on this pretty diligently as a city and community and region. Electrification of buildings, electrification of transportation, fleet vehicles, and electrification of small engines equipment. I'm going to skip through this quite a bit. This is all just good additional information. I did think this was kind of cool. Currently, speaking of transport, we have 6 electric buses with 5 additional electric buses coming in early 2026. So we're not kind of telling everybody to do this or that. We are definitely, City of Fort Collins, city staff, city council are leading by example. Okay, so here we go. Building electrification, 2028, 2030, 2031, building energy code implementation, incentives using the 2050 tax, lead by example, small engines, building into the future. Okay, so they want to have the work plan for a strategic funding plan completed for 2026 council priority setting. Right now, they're really just kind of like talking about like, what do we need to do here for our climate future, strategic funding, and next moves. All right, in our last conversation, we're going to breeze through this a little bit because honestly, it kind of was not over my head per se, but just not as sexy as the last 3 things. But parking in Fort Collins, downtown Fort Collins, is a big issue. We have a civic center master plan where, it's a 12-block plan for downtown Fort Collins where we actually own quite a bit of buildings. We own this many buildings in our 12-block area. I think it's 12 buildings. Oh, no, don't know how many buildings. 12-block area, and these are all the city-owned buildings in that civic center area. And what they're trying to talk about is, hey, we are using this parking lot. We don't want to use it anymore. We want to build a parking structure there off of Maple, north of Maple, and then turn our 215 Mason building, which currently has municipal court and parking services, into increase or absorb, build on, add on to our municipal courts for that, renovate the first floor for our municipal court expansion. There we go. And there was some conversation on different council members. There was some pros and cons. Council member Kelly Olson was like, I actually really like the parking here, and I think we should push people to these parking garages that we have. The cost to build is about $40,000 per parking space, and they're going to build 600 parking spaces. Yeah, here we go. 600 spaces is what they want to build, which equates to about $20 million is roughly the estimated cost of this parking garage. So I think that long-term, the parking garages are probably what needs to happen. And then on-street parking is very short-term. Currently it's 2-hour parking, but really maybe it should be 90 minutes or pay for parking, something to where they're trying to offload the on-street parking to our parking structures that we currently have. But there are some challenges with that as well, because the operational cost for these parking structures is not being met by the revenue that's generated from these parking structures. So all these fun things to balance. And City of Fort Collins, among other different cities across the country, you know, we have a balanced budget approach. We can't take on debt or not necessarily without voter approval, but our budget has to be balanced. So when we see things like this, it's something that we have to address and make cuts. If we're going to build out this transit plan, we need 18 million and we only have 5 million. We have a $13 million budget shortfall. Well, we're not going to do it. We're going to have to figure out something or make different changes. So, all right. That was our city council work session breakdown. I think I pretty much hit on everything on that. So the last things is things to do this weekend. I jumped onto the Visit Fort Collins website. It's a great website. They've always got lots of cool blog posts and articles going on, but we got Memorial Day coming up. Lots of pools are going to be opening up, lots of barbecues that are happening. But here are some things to do. Memorial Day ceremony at Veterans Plaza. Whitewater rafting. It is that time of the year. Right now is actually high water. And I mean, talk about like if you get into the late June, early July, and then if you get into like late July and August, like the water just goes totally down. But like right now it's ripping and roaring. You don't want to be tubing right now. Let me reiterate that. We generally have like a death or two every year because people tube down the pooter, and it is not safe. At least for right now, maybe in the next, maybe mid-June. I don't know when the exact date is, but mid-June is really when it starts to become more safe. And then obviously, you know, easy floating into late June, early July. And then it kind of is this shift of, I mean, you can whitewater raft, I think all season, but right now it's ripping and roaring. So if you want to, there's lots of different opportunities: Mountain Whitewater, A Wonderless Adventure, A1 Wild Water, and Rocky Mountain Adventures, just to name a few. My team and I went on one last year, and I think they've got levels 1 through 5, and we chose level 3, which really was pretty like a little bit low key. So depending on your adrenaline, your ability to swim, your desire to get that heart racing, I would go level 4 or 5. Going camping, it is definitely that time. Make sure to wear sunscreen, or not sunscreen, sunscreen, but also mosquito spray. Mosquitoes are starting to come out. We're feeling them in the evenings, and so make sure to wear that sunscreen, but mosquito spray. But check out Red Feather up north, or obviously all the different national parks that you can reserve spots, but tons of great spots to go camping. Horsetooth Reservoir and Horsetooth Mountain and Horsetooth Falls. Again, right now the water is kind of ripping and roaring, so you actually are going to see a fall at Horsetooth Falls, and the water levels are rising all over the place. Boats are going to be out. It is a blast. It's a hoot to be boating on Horsetooth during the summer. Best friend to have is a friend with the boat. Don't be the friend with the boat, in my opinion. You got to store it, take care of it, all that kind of stuff. Just be the friend that has friends with boats. Drive up the Pooter and enjoy lunch or music at Mishawaka. Have a picnic. Sure. See a movie at the drive-in movie theater. I just drove by the other day. There is Sinners and Final Destination, which I did go to with my wife. I don't know why. I thought she said that she wanted to go, but apparently she said, I don't want to go, but she's a good sport. she looks over at me. No judging. Judge-free zone. But she looked over. She's like, are you covering your eyes? I was like, yeah, I don't need to see this gal's head get smushed in a trash compactor. Okay. I get the gist. And Janae was just cracking up. I don't need the gore or anything like that. But it was an entertaining movie, I guess. But drive-in movie theater, there's 2 screens, great operation, twin drive-in movie theater on the west side of town. Definitely worth exploring. Gets a little bit busy on when they have cool movie releases, but you can watch 2 different movies. I mean, if you wanted to, you can go from right now. Fortunately, the sunset's a little earlier because you get into like mid to late June and the movies don't start till like 9 o'clock, like 8:30, 9 o'clock. But right now they're starting a little bit earlier. So it's a prime time to go check it out. The trolley is back up and running as of May 3rd. So go take a ride down the trolley. This is from noon to 5 p.m. each day. So just, go take it from downtown to City Park and just enjoy yourself. And then Odell is brewing a small batch festival. 8 bands over 2 days this Memorial Day weekend. So should be a blast at Odell's. Those are some things to do this weekend. I don't see any comments or anything along those lines. So I hope you guys have a great day, and I appreciate you guys joining in every week. Make sure to leave a comment, and if you're not subscribed and if you haven't liked any of my videos, do me a favor. We're getting really close to 3,000 subscribers, which is kind of cool. I think I'm going to do with my team a 3,000 subscriber celebration. It's a small number, but it just means a lot to me that you guys are watching and engaging, and hopefully you guys are getting value out of the content that we're providing. Like today's city work session was 3 hours long. Watch that on a weekly basis, and hope to bring back a short, concise version of that for you, along with a lot of other movers and shakers and moving parts in Fort Collins. So enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Happy Memorial Day weekend. I think we'll be here next Monday, or somebody will, but we might also cut out and enjoy the full long Memorial Day weekend with our kids up at the cabin. All right, everybody, take care.